guys are enjoying this music as much as I am. Man, Radiohead. Yeah. We'll get started in a sec, you guys. Just hang tight. Got so many things in front of me here. I'm not sure if I can do the talk and fade thing, but I'll try. I'm trying. Oh, listen to that. Oh, the talk and fade. Hey guys, welcome. Thanks for coming out again. Sorry for the little date switch up. You know how it all worked, where there was a Wednesday and Thursday, and it was the last Wednesday and Thursday, so sometimes it was a week early, because the Thursday was after the last day of the month, and it just gets all wacky. So I thought we should do it on the last Wednesday of the month, which is tonight. So sorry about the switcheroo, but happy to be here and happy to have you guys. Looks like 8 folks are here right at this moment, and hopefully more are coming. Hello, Aya. Hello, Mark. Hello, Steve. Hello, Mike. Hope I didn't miss anyone. Hey, JG. Anyway, JG is back with us this week. She was on vacation last week, but she's back. And Alicia filled in, and she was awesome. And so I don't know how we'll work it, but it's great to have JG. It's great to have Alicia. It doesn't matter. At Yamaha, there's so many good people that, you know, we can cover it with anyone, but JG is special. So thank you, JG, for being here. Like I said in my very goofy video, I'm the cash money guy, apparently, when I do Steinberg Sessions videos. Sorry about that. I'm a dad, and dad jokes just kind of go with the territory. But anyway, thanks for coming out. And as I said in that ridiculous ad that we ran for a couple days, I'm gonna answer some questions. So I'm excited about that. There was a couple of last minute ones, and I'm gonna try to get to them. But I kind of based it around the ones that came in earlier. So I kind of had a plan, and you guys with your late questions, my plan's a little different maybe now, but I'll try to get to all of them. And if I don't get to them tonight, I promise I will get to them offline, but preferably in the next session, so that we make sure everybody benefits from all the questions. Anyway, without further ado, I have a track here by the Doyle Brothers. I know you guys have heard them before. Sorry, I'm going to get to my storage room eventually, but I've got a lot of these tracks on my computer right now, so that's why we're using them. But anyway, it doesn't matter anyway, because it's the ideas that matter and not the tune itself, even though I really like this tune. I co-wrote this with the Doyle Brothers. Doyle Brothers are Ryan and Todd. They're from New York. And this song is called Never Cared Anyway. Kind of a sad lyric, but we're not going to worry about the lyric. We're just going to talk about what we're talking about. So anyway, why don't I play you the tune? This is sort of a mix. I did this quite a while ago, and not all the plugins loaded, and so there's a few things that are a little out of whack. And the first question that I received was how to process a vocal. So when you're listening to this, it's kind of a mix, but I stripped the vocal of everything, so what you're hearing is just the vocal recording. And I also took the EQ off the 2 mix because I didn't want that to be influencing how we look at the vocal when we get there. So what you're hearing is sort of a track in process. And really, the reason we're here at Steinberg Sessions is because we all have tracks in process. So we might as well dive into a track in process and understand how to finish that track to the best of our ability. So without further ado, let's play the tune, Never Cared Anyway by the Doyle Brothers. Lots of cool little sounds and stuff, but we're mainly going to be focusing on the vocal. And I got a whole bunch of background vocals in and stuff right now too, but we're going to focus on the lead vocal. But anyway, let's listen to the tune.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned. All I need a hideaway till this rising. All I see are signs. All this needed was time. I gotta say it to you. I've held back so long, but now that we're being true, we've always been wrong. I've closed my mind to the thought of you, 'cause you never get anyway. Still believe in my destiny. Hope is still hanging on. Locked outside the best of me. Hope is rising long. All I see are signs. All this needed was time. I gotta say it to you. I've held back so long, but now that we're being true, we've always been wrong. I've closed my mind to the thought of you, 'cause you never get anyway. I know you never get anyway. I've closed my mind one final time. I gotta say it to you. I've held back so long, but now that we're being true, we've always been wrong. What I'm saying to you, I've held back so long. Not that you ever knew, we've always been wrong. You never cared anyway. No, you never cared anyway. No, you never cared anyway. You never cared anyway. No, you never cared anyway.
Oh, I went to jazz school for that last chord. Anyway, so there's the tune. that's one that I'm sort of proud of. It's such a pretty song, and I think these guys do a great job with it. I really like it, and I hadn't heard it for a while until I started planning for this, so I'm excited to be working on this. But anyway, so vocal. Let's talk about the vocal from the beginning to the end. So when I'm recording the vocal, let me put back big here. When I'm recording the vocal, it depends on the project, but with this project, the way we did it is when I work with these guys, I had my chapel studio, which had an apartment in it, and it was great because folks could come and stay with me, and we would just work, like mad work, like intense work, like 24 hours a day work, and it's a great way to make a record. There's no interruptions, and you're very focused. So highly recommend it if you ever have an opportunity, maybe even during a pandemic, to make a record like that. But I digress. So these guys would come and stay with me, and we would just work constantly. And we would always be working on a few tunes at a time, and we could kind of, when one got stale, we'd hop to another one, and we'd move around and do things that way. But anyway, when it came to the vocals, when we felt like we had enough tracks to cut vocals, what we would do is we would pull up the track, and we just left our vocal setup in the room. It was a huge room, so we could leave it set up all the time. So anytime Ryan was ready for a vocal, he could just run over there. I could set up the track, and boom, we were ready to go. So what we would do is over the course of 2 or 3 days, we would record takes, passes from beginning to end. We wouldn't do it a section at a time. We wanted it to have that sort of progression that it sounds like when a singer sings a song from beginning to end. So we would just do takes, and then we would comp it together. So I would sort of line up all the tracks, and we'd take it a line at a time, and we'd listen to each one. So take 1 of that line, take 2 of that line, take 3 of that line, take 4 of that line. And we pick the best one, and then we go to the next line. And then take 1 of that line, take 2. Sometimes we had upwards of 11 or 12 different takes to work from. So it was quite a lot of work to get the vocal compiled or comped or edited, as all different people might say. But anyway, and then we would listen to the first line and see how it flowed into the second line. And once we, as we went along, we kept doing this until we got one that sounded like the best take that Ryan could have done. In some of the cases, and I'm going to spin you through the session here so you can see the cuts. In some of the cases, it was actually like we would take one word from one of the takes and other parts from others. So there are some cuts that are pretty involved, and it can be quite time consuming. So then once we chopped it all up, then I do little crossfades over each cut so that there's a smooth, one fades out and one fades in, and so it's smooth going from the one to the next. So let's take a look at that. We'll go back to the session here. So this is the lead vocal track, and if I zoom in here, you guys can see, let's actually play it.
I don't need to
Cut.
go
Cut.
run away.
So yeah.
To go run away. I just wanna feel stone.
So as you can see, there's quite a lot of cuts.
All I need a hideaway till this right isn't wrong.
You can hear a little trail reverb. That's actually the sound of the room because it was a chapel. It was a big room, and so the microphone would pick it up. Now let's look at some of the more intense cut parts here. Here's a pretty intense cut. Let's have a listen to this.
But now that we're being true.
So there was a bunch of cuts in that.
But now that we're being true.
But hopefully the goal here is to make it sound as natural as possible, as if he might have sung it. That's the idea. So you can see the cuts. Here's another one. I think it was the same line.
But now that we're being true.
So we obviously had some days he was singing parts of that line better than other days. Here's a few more.
Mind to the thought of you, 'cause you never get anywhere.
Yeah, you can really hear the chapel room in there. Anyway, more cuts. Let's just see.
I gotta say it to you. I've held back so long, but now that we're being true.
Okay, so I think when you listen though, it sounds very much like he sang it. I think if you're not looking at it, if you close your eyes and you don't see the edits, I think it sounds like a vocal take. So when you're compiling or you're editing or you're comping it together, your goal is always to try to make it sound like it was sung that way. And the crossfading helps, and certainly the choices that you make help. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky. A lot of people ask me, well, do you pick the take that's the most in tune? Do you pick the take that has the best timing? Do you pick the take that has the best performance? What are your priorities? And usually for me, I would always pick the best performance over the best tuning or the best take. Because if you're making a recording where you're planning to do a little bit of auto tuning or melodyning or any kind of tuning type thing to the vocal, you can fix that. And in terms of timing issues, you can slide it around if you don't like the way that it came out naturally. I don't tend to do too much of that because I try to preserve the performance of the vocalist. But those are things that I can alter. But the one thing I cannot change in a recording is the energy of the performer. So if there's a take that has particularly good energy and there's something a little wobbly or not quite right about it, no biggie, we'll try to fix that when we edit and mix it. I would rather have the energy in a little wobbly bit than not have the energy and have it sound perfect, because in my world, there's nothing worse than a flat or boring vocal. So that's a priority for me, is always to take the best performance. Sometimes you get into a little bit of a corner where you can't choose the one you want because it doesn't go with the little bit that you chose before or the bit that you chose after. And so you're sort of put in this position where, which is the most important part? And those are just judgment calls. When you get into that situation, you kind of have to decide what's the most important line in this phrase, what's the most important part of this phrase, choose the best part of that, and then make the other pieces work. And they won't always be your first takes, but if you do enough takes and if the singer's good enough, then chances are you can get most of your favorite parts in there. But every once in a while, you'll have to settle for a little thing that isn't quite right. Of course, you can always, and I do this a lot too, you can always go back and have the singer re-record that little bit that you're not quite happy with yet. And certainly if you've comped an entire vocal and you're not quite, you think there's a section that they didn't quite get, I would encourage you to make them go back in and re-sing it again, because that will always make a difference. Now, in terms of the recording of the vocal, nothing special here. The microphone was an Electro Voice RE20. I don't have mine sitting here at the moment. I'm sorry, I should have grabbed that before we went live, but I don't have it here. But hey, I have a web browser here. Let's pull it up just so you guys can see what an RE20 looks like. Some of you that have been in studios before will know what this mic is. There it is, RE20. Okay, yeah, you've seen this before. Pretty sure you've seen this before. If you've ever been in a studio, you know what that's all about. So that's an RE20. Now, some people are like, dude, that's like a kick drum mic, or that's a guitar amp mic. It can be, and it's amazing for those things. But it's also an amazing voiceover mic. You see them in a lot of radio stations for voiceovers. And I also find a lot of people talk about the Shure SM7B, which is another phenomenal mic. Michael Jackson recorded his vocals with that. A lot of bands, everybody's recorded their vocals with a Shure SM7B. And a lot of people are like, why would you choose an RE20 over an SM7B? They have a similar thing. The RE20, in my journeys, always sounded better on a higher pitched or a female voice, and the SM7B always sounded better on a male voice for whatever reason. Michael Jackson notwithstanding, obviously. But anyway, and the other advantage to the RE20 is it has a pop filter built in. So those terrible P-pops that you get from microphones, they don't really happen with the RE20. The RE20 is pretty fantastic. So, so that was the microphone we used, and then we just went into an API preamp and I think a compressor and maybe one or two other things, doing a little bit of something, but not too much. This is basically Ryan's voice through the RE20 and straight into the recorder. So that's what we're working with today. So we've edited. What's the next thing I do after I edit? I tune it. Now, in a future episode, I'm going to take you guys through tuning, and I know I keep talking about this, and we'll get there. I promise. It's coming. It's coming soon. But I use auto-tune. Melodyne is a big one. There's tuning built into Cubase, which we can talk about. I'm going to devote an entire episode to tuning. So stay tuned for that. So this was tuned. I'm not going to talk about how I tuned it because I'm going to save that. But this was tuned. And then I'm ready to mix. So let's have a listen again in the context and let's hear what we're hearing.
I don't need to go run away. I just
So it sounds pretty good. Like it's maybe missing a little bit of treble, a little bit of the crispness that you would expect in a vocal.
hide away till this rising.
The other thing I hear is there's a little bit of kind of low mid stuff that we might want to get rid of.
Our signs. All this needed was time. I gotta say it to you.
And obviously the chorus pops out a little bit and the verse is kind of quiet and some of the lower, quieter notes get lost a little bit. So there's a compression thing that's happening there.
I've closed my mind to the thought of you, 'cause you never get anyway. Still believe in my...
Now it's not terrible in this case, but there's some of the S's sound a little, to me, a little bit hard, and so I'd like to kind of maybe fix those as well. Just telling you guys what I'm hearing when I listen to this.
Best of me. Oh, this rising long. All I see are signs. All this needed was time. I gotta say it to you. I've held back so long. Now that we're being true,
Okay, it sounds like we got a strategy. So we talked about the treble could be a little bit more, but we got some SE stuff that we got to take care of. The low mids are a little big, need some compression, and obviously it's pretty dry. We need some effects on this as well. Oh, look who's here. Jarrett, my colleague, is here. Hey, Jarrett. Omar, my boss, is here. Hey, Omar. Uh-oh, he retracted a message. What did he say? Did anyone see it? Maybe I'm in trouble. Anyway, hey, you have an Electro Voice mic. Cool, that's very cool. And hey, Siobhan, my kid is here. That's awesome. Oh man, there's like a big discussion happening here. I don't know if I told you guys this, but Siobhan and I opened a show for a Montreal band called Stars. It was one of these drive-in concerts, and it was a pretty epic show. For those of you that maybe have spun by my Facebook page, you could see the big stage. It was pretty awesome. The drive-in thing is cool, and it felt amazing to play again. But man, is it weird, people honking their horns, and you kind of miss the real live people thing happening. So but anyway, thanks for chatting about that. It was pretty awesome, and it was a real honor for Siobhan and another band, Dizzy. they won a Juno. They were pretty awesome too, so we were fortunate to be on there. So anyway, back to the task at hand. Okay, so how do I start this? Well, I'm gonna go into the mixer and I'm gonna get some inserts happening. So the first thing I do, kind of down in the list here, is I put one of two analyzers that I have. I'll show them both to you. Either the HEQ from Waves, which looks like that, or the other analyzer that sometimes I use is called Paz, which is also from Waves. For those of you that don't know, there's a little box here when you go to choose a plugin, and you can just, if you know the name of the plugin you're looking for, so if there's plugins that you use often, you can just start to type the name and then it populates, and it's pretty awesome. It saves you a lot of time scrolling. If you're like me and you have way too many plugins, you do a lot of scrolling, and so this saves time. But anyway, let's pop in the Paz here, and I'll just show you guys what they do. We can have them both up here on screen. Let's make the vocal loud and proud. Let's have a listen to the track again. And what it's going to do is it's going to give me real-time analysis. The Paz by default will save the kind of overall curve that's happening. On the HEQ, I actually have to hit peak hold to get it to hold. But so anyway, so I'll run one or sometimes both of these because I find that they sort of hear different things and the curves look a little different, as you can see. Now, why am I doing this? And why am I putting it way down in the list? Well, the reason I put it way down in the list of inserts is because I'm going to do all that stuff that we just talked about up in here. I'm going to insert plugins here, and then I can refresh this, and then I can see the difference that the plugins that I put up here made to the sound. So that's why I put them down here. And it shows me things, like I told you, it was a little dull, and you can see we've got a big dip here in the high frequency, just below 5, which is actually kind of where we want the vocal to sit. So we've got a bit of a problem there. And I told you we got some a little low mid issue, and you can see it right here. It's kind of a big thing. So on Paz, if I want to see the frequency, I can just click on the screen and it kind of shows me there. You can see that. But it's not as accurate as if I grab one of these EQ bands and actually pull it in, and I'll take dim off, and you can hear that I can not only see the frequency that's happening, but I can actually hear, I can look for the bad place where I don't like the sound. So here we go, I'm gonna take it off.
Being true, we've always been wrong.
Okay, so that's pretty gross sounding. Might have even blown up your speakers. Sorry about that. Okay, so we're on the blue band here, and it's showing me that's at 712K. Now, if I'm in a hurry and I'm trying to get a mix done quickly, then I'll just do it with this EQ. I'll just like pull it down like that, and then I can adjust the bandwidth to be wider or more narrow, and I can adjust this way, and I can listen.
I don't need to go.
So we kind of fixed that honky sound, and now the vocal is starting to sound a little bit more clear. I can do it with this EQ. On Paz, I cannot. It's just an analyzer, so I can just see stuff here. But I've got better sounding EQs, so even though if I'm in a hurry I might do it here, I'm not going to do it here. But it helped me find a good frequency. So where I pulled it down there was 680, 679, 680. So that's probably a frequency that I'm going to mess with on my really nice sounding EQ. Now if I go over here and I look, this super low point here, the yellow band here, it says 4055 is where I had it. So that's showing me around 4K. I'm super low. Now, 4K as a frequency is a bit hard, and I can show you that. Let's make it narrow. We'll go to this one. And I'll boost so you can hear.
I don't need to go.
Now, that's a super sizzly frequency, but if we go just up from there a little bit, like maybe closer to 5, like maybe 5, like 4.8, and that's the sweet spot for me. But listen to this. This will be a little better.
I don't need to go.
Now, it's too much, but that's infinitely sweeter sounding than that 4K was. So that's a pretty good place where I'm going to mess with. And again, I could just turn this on and this on, and those too much, but I can just do that, and my EQ is getting pretty close to where I want it. But I'm going to do it with a better sounding EQ, a really special one that Yamaha used to make. Unfortunately, it's not a current product anymore, but we've got so many great sounding EQs, and this technology is, some of this sort of sound is even built into Cubase now. So even though you can't buy this plugin anymore, you're going to get pretty close with what's in here anyway. In any case, so there's my two things. And of course, for the people that have tuned in with me for a long time, you also know that I like to get rid of like stuff I don't need at the top and the stuff I don't need at the bottom, because as you can see, just the natural curve of it is there's not a lot going on way up there, and there's really not a lot going on down here either. So I'm probably going to do something kind of similar to that, maybe not as extreme, but I'm probably going to do something sort of like that. And before we get into the fancy plugins, let's just reset this, and we can reset this. And let's take a look at what the curve looks like now, just with these changes.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned. All I need a hideaway till this rising.
Look at Paz, you guys. See how much flatter that is and how it's got a nice kind of upward arc? Oh, we're doing something good.
All this needed was time. I gotta say it to you. I've held back so long.
I think it sits in the track nicer too. We don't even have compression yet.
We've always been wrong. I've closed my mind to the thought of you, 'cause you never get anyway.
Okay, so yeah, so it's looking much flatter. There's not stuff sticking out, and that's the kind of an indication that maybe there's a peak or something in the recording didn't quite work out. I mean, there are certain sounds that have spiky bits in an analyzer, and they sound the way they do because of that, and you don't want to mess with that. But on a vocal especially, you want to make it so that it's kind of a smooth, kind of present sound with not stuff sticking out too much, because that'll hurt, because it's usually pretty loud in the mix, and we don't want people's ears to hurt. We want them to enjoy listening to our mixes. So I told you I'm going to use fancy plugins, so let's use some fancy plugins. So what do I use to do the filtering? I use something called a Pultec filter, which is made by my friends at UAD, Universal Audio. So this is the plugin. It's pretty awesome. It's kind of models an old vintage guy, and so this is the low cut and this is the high cut. And so generally I'll just listen. I'm going to bypass the EQ here. Generally I'll just listen, and let's turn this off so that we can keep this on. I want the analyzer on. So generally I listen, and I'll just roll the bottom up until it gets a little too thin, and then I'll bring the top down until it starts to dull, and then I'll roll it back up. So I'll show you. So here we go.
I don't need
Not too much
to
difference.
go run away.
Sounds good.
I just
Vocal
want
is starting to sound a bit thin.
all I need.
You can see it starts to sound like a transistor radio. So it's probably somewhere. It's probably somewhere down here. I'm gonna go with, I don't know, maybe 80, 100. Let's be conservative. Let's go with 80. And when I was experimenting here, I put it at 87. So it's somewhere in between, but we'll go with 80. And now let's deal with the top end.
I don't need to go run away. I just want.
And again, you can hear it kind of getting sort of dark and sort of transistor radio-ish. Normally for me, it's like 15.
I don't need to.
Sometimes if I put it to 12, it tightened things up a little bit. And again, when we were just sort of doing the prototype down here, we had it at 16K. So let's go with 15. I think that's a pretty good place. So that would be my filter, and I wouldn't use these filters. I would leave them out of the equation.
I don't need to go run away. I just.
So if I take it out of the loop here, you can hear the vocal is a little bit louder, but it's not quite as focused. It sounds a little more focused with the filter in. So let's have a listen to that. So here we are in.
It's rising from
I'll take it out.
all I see
In.
are signs.
It's pretty subtle, but it just kind of sits in a nice place. So I'm gonna go with that. Now, I told you about this fancy schmancy EQ. It was a Rupert Neve Portico design. He did this special for Yamaha, and oh my goodness, I really enjoy this plugin. But there's lots of other options available. It's a 4-band EQ, and you know, I've saved myself a whole bunch of trouble here by figuring out these frequencies. So I had it around 680, and I had it around 4.8. So 680 is going to be, let's put this band around 680. There's around 680, and this one at around 4.8. And check it out. I can boost, and I can cut. And now I've got the filter happening here, and I've got the EQ that we were talking about happening here, and let's have a listen to what's going on.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned. All I need a hideaway till it's rising from all I see are signs. All this needed was time. I gotta say it to you.
Out.
I've held back so long.
Yeah, it just kind of comes into focus, which is awesome. EQ is amazing. JG is messaging me. There's questions. What are the names of those two plugins? Aya. Which ones? This one is Waves Paz Analyzer. This one is called Waves HEQ. It's pretty cool EQ. You can usually get it pretty cheap, and it's amazing. This is the Rupert Neve Designs Portico 5033 EQ. He actually makes this in like hardware knob guys that you can buy. You know, actually put in a rack, and you can do that thing. So yeah, that's an actual emulation of hardware, which is the hardware's awesome. So are the plugins. And this is the UAD, Universal Audio. You need one of their processor boxes. Pultec HLF3C. It's just a high and low pass filter. So that's what we've got so far. Now, the other thing that we talked about is compression. And I think that's something that we need to look at right now, because for those of you that are maybe noticing when those background vocals come in, we're kind of losing the lead vocal a little bit. So let's look at a compressor. I'm going to use, again, one of my favorites. And why is it my favorite? Well, I like it because I can put it in and I can compress a whole lot, and it doesn't really sound like a lot of compression is happening, which in my world is pretty great, because that means I can compress more and it doesn't sound weird. And then maybe if I want to hear the compression, I can add a second compressor, which I'm going to do. But anyway, so let's find the Rupert Neve Designs Portico compressor. It's the 5043, and let's put this one in. So let's have a listen to the vocal without it first, and then we're going to put this in and see what's going on.
I don't need to go run away.
So let's pop it in. It's already gained up 4 dB, so it's going to be louder, but I'm probably going to do 4 decibels of compression. So when I'm setting a compressor, normally I leave the volume at 0, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to crank the threshold down so it's compressing a lot. I want to hear a lot of compression. I'm contradicting myself what I just said earlier. I'm not going to leave it with a lot of compression, but when I'm setting the compressor, I like to hear it a lot so I can kind of dial it in. Once I've got a lot of compression happening, then I'm going to adjust the attack and release on the compressor until I like what I hear, and then I'm going to back it off again. So this is the way I do it. So let's crank the threshold down.
Run away.
So as you can see, lots of compression happening here. Now, I was telling you about those S's that we were having I had the S's, and since I put that EQ on, they're a bit louder now, aren't they? We got to fix that. So one of the ways that I like to sort of help with the S's is with the attack control on a compressor. So as you can see, as I make the attack faster, it chops off the S a little bit, and I can almost make the S's go away. Let's have a listen to that.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
Hear that? Like the S's they're getting softer.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
Let's listen to it with the attack way up, and you can hear the difference.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
Now, I don't want them to be completely gone, because I like that little edge that they have, and it helps the vocal cut through. So it's probably going to be somewhere, I usually end up 34 microseconds, 33 microseconds. Let's have a listen to this.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
I like that, 32 microseconds, because it's smooth, but I can still hear it. So mess with the attack, and then hopefully it helps trim off those S's a little bit. I've got it at 2.5 to 1. That's the ratio. That's how much compression I'm doing. We can talk about ratios in a future episode, but that's a pretty good place. A lot of times I live in 3 to 1. That's a pretty good place for me.
I don't need to go run.
Now, 3 to 1 is just going to sound a little tighter and a little bit more, kind of like it's going to punch a little bit more. So maybe that's a good thing for me too. Now, the final thing I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the release, because I want the compression's going to hit it, but then I want it to lay off of it kind of smooth, in a smooth way. I don't want the vocals to feel too like they're pumping too much. So I generally on this compressor use pretty long release times. It's already at 186 microseconds, which is pretty long, but I'm probably going to lengthen it a little bit more here.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
So it's, again, pretty subtle, but that sounds more natural to me. So I've got the attack at 32 microseconds, the release at 240 microseconds, 3-to-1 ratio, and now I can adjust the threshold so that, because you noticed I was getting upwards towards 6 decibels of gain reduction, 6 decibels of compression, which in a rock and roll mix is not very much, but in this kind of softer thing, I think it's a lot. So I'm going to roll it back to a place where I feel like there's compression, but it's just sort of doing a subtle thing.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
Okay, that sounds pretty great to me. Let's listen without the compression.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
It's a little more raw, so let's put the compression on.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
Now, I think it's smoother, and I think that's pretty obvious that it's smoother, but it's quieter. We don't want it quieter. Well, the reason is because the compression is making it quieter. So what we have to do, that's why we have this output gain knob, and so we have to watch how much compression we're getting, and then we have to compensate by turning it up that much. So the compressor is pushing it down, and we're going to turn the whole thing up a little bit. So let's just listen to that bit again, and let's watch to see what the maximum amount of compression gain reduction is that we're getting. Let's check that out.
I don't
So if we
need
watch
to
this,
go
it's kind of flicking on 4.
away. I just wanna feel stoned.
So it's probably about 4 is what we're getting. So let's just turn the gain up to 4. And for those of you that were paying attention, when I first pulled it up, it was at 4, and so it was already where it needed to be. But just to show you how I go about setting the compressor. Okay, so I think this is pretty good. Let's listen. Now when we compare the uncompressed and the compressed, there shouldn't be a big volume difference. So let's hear it with no compression. This is no compression.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
All right, let's hear it with compressor.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
Okay, so it's, for me, to my ears, way smoother, sounds more like a record. This is the sound of records. And again, it's still subtle, but I think we're making a big difference. Let's hear it with none of this stuff on it. And then we'll hear it with the EQ and the compression. So this is just the vocal.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
And here it is with the stuff we have so far.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
Okay, so we're getting somewhere. I want to take care of those S's completely. I think that the attack on the compressor did a little bit, but I think we should get rid of this problem altogether. So my favorite de-esser is, again, a universal audio one called the Precision de-esser. Now, for those that were at the Chris Anderson session we did, I don't know, I guess it was many months, but it was pre-pandemic, because it was 7 or 8 months ago. Chris puts de-essing at the end of the chain. I put it at the beginning, and we had a bit of a discussion that night about it. I like to take care of the S's before all the rest of the stuff happens. He thinks because all of the processing makes that the S's come out, he wants to take care of it after all the processing has been added. But I take care of it first. No one's right, just different approaches. Try them both and see which one works for you. But I put it first in the chain here. Now, here's another place where our analyzers can really help. And S's are always in high frequencies, and they always kind of live somewhere between, usually between 5 and 14K. So if we kind of look up in this area, we've kind of got two places where there's something happening. This spot right here, if we look at that, that's 8.6K. We've also got this spot here, back here, where we boosted the at 4.8K. And I don't think I want to take anything out of there because, as I told you, that's kind of where the vocal lives. That's a good frequency. So those frequencies I don't want to bring down. So I think it's probably up here around 8.6K, 8.7. So again, the analyzer makes it super fast for me to identify these frequencies. Now, I'm showing you guys how to do this with tools. But in a perfect world, we all just use our ears to do this. And before I had these tools, I had to develop my ears to do this. So try to develop your ears so that you can do it and you just hear the frequency and you know where to go. But until that stage, and even if you've spent many years trying to develop your ears, these things still help a lot. So don't be afraid to use the tools you have, but keep working on your ears because that's an important thing too. So in this precision UAD precision de-esser, I'm going to set this to 8.6. Okay, so I've set it to 8.6. I'm going to cheat and I'm going to show you that the Q that I like is usually around 0.82. That's an in-depth discussion for another time, but it's basically how much of the S, like do we want just a very narrow S or do we want a lot of S? And for me, the sweet spot is 0.8 for the bandwidth. So 8.6, okay, and then the threshold, we basically just turn this down, and when I'm playing it, you'll be able to see how much every time an S hits, you'll see this meter will take it out. It's like it's a special kind of a compressor, basically. So if I turn the threshold,
Run away. So
you can see on just and stoned, it just really jumped. Until you can see it took like almost 15 decibels. So that's a lot. The thing I love about this de-esser though is you can actually de-ess that much and it doesn't ruin the sound. Some other de-essers, if you had it taking out 15 decibels of stuff, it would be pretty crazy. So anyway, probably somewhere in the middle, because you were seeing that the meters were kind of doing stuff on non-S's. So that means that they're actually taking 8.6 kilohertz out of other words, which I don't want. So let's try to get it so that it's mostly just taking out the S's. So that's good. That's good.
Run away.
It's leaving.
I just wanna feel stoned.
Cool. So now it's just taking out S's and T's and those kinds of sounds. And I think it sounds pretty nice. Let's hear it without the de-esser.
I don't need
Hard.
to go.
Hard.
Run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
So just and stoned were pretty hard. They're sticking out a bit. So let's put it in and listen again.
I don't need to go. Run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
I'm liking it. It's much getting smooth. It's starting to sound nice. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a second compressor. And Brent, why do you use two compressors? Why don't you just use one compressor a lot? Well, for a couple of reasons. First of all, in the olden days of analog hardware, I found that I could compress a lot, like like 10, 15 dBs of compression on a hardware, like a rack mount compressor, and it would sound great. But then when we started mixing with plugins, and we've come a long way, but I just find plugins, they sound just as good at moderate amounts of compression, but not so good with crazy massive amounts of compression. Although we're getting closer and closer all the time. I have some plugins now that I could probably do 10 or 15 decibels of compression and be happy with the sound. But as a general rule, I find that plugins don't handle the extremes quite as well. So that's one reason. The other reason is because the Rupert Neve compressor that I used, it's a very transparent compressor. Like I said to you, you can compress a lot and you don't really hear it as compression. But in a pop or a rock mix, I actually want to hear a little bit of compression. And so a transparent compressor like the Rupert Neve one isn't the only sound I'm looking for. I probably want something that's a little bit harder sounding that I can sort of bump it up a little bit as well. So what's my favorite? Well, it's a classic, and it is the Universal Audio 1176. You know, I should have just typed 1176, shouldn't I have? Anyway, we'll get there. There it is. I can never remember what the first part is. It's the UA 1176. Now, there's a whole bunch of these. They've got sort of different eras of them, and I can show you a couple. So Reve, this is the original version of it, and then there's this other, there's a couple more. I'll just show you one more. UA, there we go. That's getting me a little closer. So here's another one. And if you've been in studios, you've probably seen these things in racks. It doesn't matter a whole lot which one you use. They all kind of do the same thing, but they have slightly, subtly different characters. I like the oldie. I like this old one. I just think it sounds cool. Anyway, so let's mess with this. So I'm going to take this one out of the mix here. But normally when I'm doing a vocal, especially if it's someone I haven't worked before and it's the first time I've recorded their vocal, I may try all of the 1176 compressors. I may try some other compressors too. But I find these are the ones that work for me the best. And every once in a while I'll use a different 1176 or I'll use a different compressor altogether. Waves has some Chris Lord-Alge 1176s as well, which are fantastic. I highly recommend them. So, okay, so how am I going to dial in the 1176? Well, I want to hear this one. So
Don't need to go run.
Now it's a little bit different in the sense that I set the ratio with these push buttons. And for those of you that like rock and roll drums, you can have them all in. That's a crazy, amazing sound. It's not my favorite for a vocal in this context. Might be amazing in a rock vocal, but for this I'm not going to use it. So I'm usually 8-1 on this because I want it to be a little bit harder. What happens is the input feeds the compressor. So the more input you put into it, the more compression. And then you have to obviously balance the output out. So generally, the first thing I'll do is I'll play the vocal.
Don't need to go.
And I push the input until I start to see something happen.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
Now I think that's pretty obvious what's happening. Let's hear it without that.
I don't need to go.
Here it is.
Run away.
Whoa, rock and roll. That's the sound of records right there. Anyway, so it's pretty simple, and that's usually about how much I have is around 5 dB on the peaks. And then I will sort of mess with the attack and release again just to sort of work on those S's a little bit more, just to find a sweet spot. And again, sometimes I like a fast release so that it pumps more, and sometimes I like a long release to smooth it out. So let's hear what's going on with that stuff.
Don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
So you can see I pulled the attack quicker, and wow, those S's sound totally different, a lot smoother now. Now let's check out the release and see what it's doing.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
Okay, so that's a faster release, and I'm not sure I like it quite as much as I like it somewhere.
I don't need to go.
Yeah, it's a little smoother when it's back here a little bit. So that's kind of a basic setting. Let's have a listen to more of the vocal now. Let's take a look. I think this is pretty good. Let's sort of have the analyzers going here and see what we got. See what we got happening. And oops, did I just move your screen? Sorry about that. So let's get the analyzers happening and let's see what's going on. Let's listen to a bit more of this vocal.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned. All I need a hideaway till this right isn't wrong. All I see are signs. All this needed was time. I gotta say it to you. I've held back so long, but now that we're being true, we've always been wrong. I've closed my mind to the thought of you, 'cause you never get anyway. Still believe in my destiny. Hope is still hanging on. Locked outside the best of me. Hope this fight isn't long. All I see are signs. All this needed was time. I gotta say it to you. I've held back so long.
Okay, so this vocal for me is sitting way better, and you know, just sometimes it's funny how these things work. A word I've been using this whole time is smooth. I wanted to make the vocal smooth, and as you can see, remember how this looked when we first started? It was pretty spiky and all these little spiky things, and now look at how smooth the analysis looks. So it's funny how sometimes the science sort of imitates what our ears are. Well, that's what it's supposed to do, is tell us what our ears are hearing, and as we can see, that's kind of what's happening. So, you know, like in the loud parts of the vocal, it's compressing a little too much, so I back that off a little bit. I mess with the attack and release a little bit just to fix up the S's, and you know, I may listen one or two passes and sort of tweak a little bit, but I think we're pretty close to something that I like. Now, if there was something that was bothering me about this, I may insert another EQ in here. Like if I was really being picky, maybe this section in here, I might want to do something about. So that's the same, it's in the same place, 726. But so I could either pull it out of, this one. I could just pull this down a bit more, which I actually did on that pass. Or I could just use another EQ. And another one of my faves is the manly massive, the massive passive. So, so we can put this one in, and you know, I could find something around 680, and I could cut bell, and you know,
I
I could maybe.
don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
And that just kind of maybe takes care of it.
All I need.
Yeah, that sounds nice. So, anyway, so that's kind of what I would do for setting up a vocal. So I hope that kind of answered. Do we have any more questions? Doesn't look like it. We're gonna keep rocking here. So, effects. We need some effects. It's too dry. This is where it gets really fun. Okay, another thing I do for those of you that were looking at the mix is, if you saw in the mixer, I've got all these blue channels here. These are groups. It's group drums, group overheads, group bass, group guitars, group Wurlitzer, group organ, group keys, group vocal, group background vocal. And by the way, all the instruments in this, there are no digital instruments in this. These are all played. That's my real Wurlitzer, which is sitting right over there. And the bass was a synthesizer, but it was actually the Mini Moog, which is sitting right over there. Anyway, and again, for those that saw my other session about this, the drum parts were originally played on a cajon, the box drum that you sit on, and then we added some real drum hits, and there's a couple of samples triggered, but all the instrumentation was played. It's all real instruments. So, okay. But anyway, back to this. So we've got this group vocal. What do we do that for? Well, I like to run everything through a group for a little bit of an additional processing. So even though we just did all that stuff on the vocal, it was just running through the stereo mix. But what I'm going to do now is up in routing here, I'm going to send it to the group vocal. And now my vocal is going to be going through this group at the end here, which is right here. What do I have in this? Pretty subtle stuff. More Pultec. Not doing much, just trimming off some 20K, which is a lot of extreme high end. I'm not even adding. Sometimes I add a little more 5K, and I'm boosting a little around 100 in the bottom. So it's just sort of a kind of an overall EQ thing, and I'm not doing much here. But the beautiful thing about these two plugins is they look old and they also sound like old analog gear, and I just love how they sound. And for those of you that have been coming to these for a while, you know, sometimes I just run things through plugins just because I like the sound, and this is one of those cases. What else is on here? I've got a Very Mu compressor. This is the Slate version of the Manley Very Mu, which is kind of a mastering compressor, and I have the Very Mu compressor as well, the UAD one. There's a UAD Manley. Whoops, what did I do? I spelled it wrong. Very Mu. Here, this is what the Manley looks like. So this Slate one is kind of based on this one, but actually I like the Slate one better, even though this is sort of based on the original. For some reason, this one just sounds really good. And what I try to do is I try to give it 1 more decibel of compression, and I put it on most things across the board. And then there's one more plug-in here. It's this old Abbey Road thing. Admittedly, after I did the session I've told some of you about at Abbey Road a few years ago, and I had an opportunity to lay my hands on the original Red Desk, I just fell in love with the thing. So I had to have the plugins, and it turns out that they kind of sound again like something old. And I'm not doing too much, just taking away a little bit of bottom end and adding a little bit of top. And again, it's just for the sound. I've got some drive happening just for the sound. So let's have a listen to what the vocal sounds like through the group.
I don't need to go run away.
Oh man, it's starting to sound more like a record, isn't it? Let's take all this processing out.
I don't need to go run away.
Guys, guys hear that? It's just a little less present. Let's put the processing back in.
I don't need to go run away.
It just kind of pops forward, which is, you know, what it's doing. And I'm not doing a lot of processing, but the sound of these plugins is so good. So, group. So, we're now finished the vocal, and I lost the camera. Sorry about that. I wonder if I can change it better. You guys don't need to see me. You just need to see Cubase. Nuendo. So let's just keep working on the thing here. So effects. So now that I'm through the group, now I want to send this to my effects. And like I told you, I have 4 effects that I like to use. A modulation is the first one I do. A delay is the second one I do. A hall reverb is the third effect I do. And the plate reverb is the 4th effect I do. So let's hear these one at a time. So right now we're listening to the vocal dry through all of the EQ and compression and sound things that we're doing. Let's hear it one more time.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
Okay, so I've got this set up so that I'm sending from my group. Whoops, that's the background channel. So I'm sending from my group. So I'm going to send it to the modulation first. And what does the modulation do? Well, the modulation is just, it gives it a slight bit of chorusing and thickness and a little bit of motion. And these days, my favorite one, so what I've done is I've saved my favorite plugins in each of these 4 things. So here's my modulation channel. Here's my delay channel, here's my hall reverb channel, and here's my plate reverb channel. So I've saved kind of some starting places of all my favorite things, and we'll go through these in a sec. So y'all know that my favorite absolute modulation plugin is this Abbey Road Real 80T, and you can see this thing moving here. That shows you that it's changing in real time. It's changing the pitch. So if I send to this right now and I turn this on, we'll actually be able to hear. I'll turn it up really loud so we can hear what it's doing.
I don't need to go run away.
If I mute it,
I just wanna feel stoned.
that's crazy. It's pretty crazy. And it's maybe a little too much right now, but can you hear what it's doing? I know you can. I also have another thing in here, just above it, for those of you that were looking at the channel here. It is dun, 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 an EQ. Brent, why are you EQing before the plugin, the effect? Well, everybody, it's because I don't want the extremes of my vocal sound muddled with effects. I just want the middle thick part of my vocal to be affected. So if I had too much bottom end stuff going into my effect, then it could get really out of control really fast. There could be, my mix could get super muddy really quickly if there's reverbs and chorusy things and delays in the low regions. So I basically take that out before it gets to the effect. And in the top end, all those S's and all that sibilant stuff, I don't want too much of that in the effect either, because that will make it super messy and essy, and it's sort of a buildup of all those high frequencies. So I want those parts of my vocal track to be there, but I don't want them in the effect because it'll just make it messy. So, so this is the EQ that's going in to this effect. So let's hear it both ways. So here it is with the EQ.
I don't need to go run away.
You can tell it's kind of thick and dreamy sounding. If I take this EQ out, you'll hear that it's a little bit more overwhelming, I find.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
You can actually hear that the S's and the T's almost sound like they've got a doubling on them, which is essentially what this is doubling. But let's hear it again and listen for the doubling on the S's and the T's.
I don't need to go.
Now if I put the CQ in, that cleans that up a little bit.
I don't need to go.
Hear how much softer the T's are? Here it is without it again. So this is no EQ, just the effect.
I don't need to go. Run.
Oh man, those T sounds are hard. If I put the CQ in,
I don't need to go. Run away.
I'm gonna use that word again, smooth, much smoother. So that's my favorite, all-time favorite modulation effect that I use. And I use that on all the vocals these days. But my second favorite one, which I used to use a lot, is this Universal Audio Studio D chorus, they call it. It's based on an old analog hardware unit called a Dimension D, which is pretty cool. It was really cool back in the day. And if you ever find one used, please tell me because I want to buy it. Anyway, the plugin is awesome and I'm quite happy to have it. Let's have a listen to what it sounds like.
I don't need to go. Run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
So it's kind of a similar thing. Here's the real ADT again.
I don't need to go. Run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
And just in case you've forgotten what the vocal sounds like without any of this stuff.
I don't need to go. Run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
They're both amazing and they both do a kind of a similar thing. Now, is there a situation where I would ever use both? Yes. A lot of times I'll use the real ADT on the lead vocal and I'll use the Studio D chorus on the background vocals just so that they have a slightly different thing. So I mess with these settings. I have them actually kind of saved the way I like them, and I would, if you ever use these plugins, just mess around until you sort of get a sound that you like and save it. And then you can just load it up like I do each time. So I'll basically mess around with this, and then I've told you that I print my effects. So the way I would do that is once I had the setting that I like from the FX mod channel, then I would go up File, I would export, audio mix down, and over here on the left, I can choose what I want to export from. So I would choose FX mod, and I would just I would name it, and I would set my settings the way I want, and then export audio. And then my effect shows up in my mix just as an audio track. So that way it's forever, and if these plugins are ever not available to me or I upgrade my computer and I can't get them anymore, no problem. I have saved my effects as audio. So I do this with each of the different effects tracks. So that's the modulation. Let's go back to the ADT because that one's better, I think. Yeah.
I don't need to go. Run.
Okay, so that's that one. Let's turn it off for a sec, and from the send, let's send to the delay. And there's all kinds of fun to be had here. So here's my favorite one, which is on. It's a UAD EP34 tape echo. Let's hear what it's doing.
I don't need to go. Run away. I just wanna feel stoned. All I need, hide away.
Now, sometimes that's eighth note I use a lot, but sometimes I'll mess with different rhythms. So that's an eighth note, but
Don't need to go. Run away.
and I'll mess around.
I just wanna feel stoned.
Sometimes it's cool as a slap.
All I need, hide away.
If you're making a John Lennon record, that's the way to do it. Anyway, you know, a lot of times I'll use eighth note. And the other thing you'll see is I have all the treble rolled off in the plugin. I like it sort of bassy and muffled. I think it makes it sound more like a vintage piece of gear. It's cool. So, and again, just in case you were wondering, dun dun dun, EQ, same thing. If I take this out, you'll hear that it gets a little messy with
Don't need to go.
the T's and stuff are big, and I even have the treble rolled down, and it's messy. So I like to take out the top and the bottom before I send. And so that's one of the delay plugins I use. Here's another one of my faves. It's based on the Roland Tape Echo. It's called the Galaxy Tape Echo. Universal Audio again, and this one sounds like this.
Don't need to go. Run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
And again, I can mess around with the the timing.
Don't need to go. Run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
As you can see, I tend to favor the more old style sounding effects. But here's a really modern one, and there's some really cool things about this. This is the Waves Man American delay, and I'll show you what I like about this plugin. Sometimes I'll use this one, especially if it's a more modern thing, but I like that I have not only control over the delay, but I've got distortion and doubling and phasing capability. So I'll show you that.
Don't need to go. Run.
So you can already hear the distortion, but let's set it to the host, and let's set it to like an eighth note. So that's an eighth, and just do something like that.
Don't need to go. Run away. I just wanna feel stoned. All I need a hideaway.
Okay, so that's just the delay. That's sounding pretty cool, by the way. I like this one the most right now. But anyway, so the cool thing about these is I can add these effects, but it's not on my vocal, it's on the delay. So if I add reverb, it's not reverb on my vocal, it's just reverb on the repeats that the delay is doing. So I'll show you that.
Don't need to go. Run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
So it makes it a little more atmospheric, which is pretty cool. The distortion is, you've heard, it's pretty cool.
Don't need to go. Run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
So you can do some really amazing things with that. Here's a doubler, which is pretty awesome as well.
Don't need to go. Run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
Super electronic-y and cool sounding, and the phaser's pretty wicked too.
Don't need to go. Run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
Okay, so I think my faves are the verb and a teeny bit of distortion and a little bit of the doubler. Let's use them all. Let's hear what this sounds like and try to make something very atmospheric.
Don't need to go. Run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
Yeah.
All I need a hideaway till this right isn't wrong.
Oh man, love this. This sounded great. Okay, there's the delay. Now I do a hall reverb. And so the hall reverb, as you can guess, is a pretty traditional thing. I've got I've got the EQ as well, just so you don't think I favor certain channels. Same thing, but look, I've got even more trimmed out in this one. less of the top and less of the bottom, and that's because reverb is going to extend everything and it could get really messy really quickly. So anyway, so I've got the EQ, I've got the Lexicon 480, Lexicon 224. I know my boss Omar has spent lots of time in studios with those. And then Manny shows up again because he has a great reverb plugin as well. These two Lexicons are made by UAD, and this one is a Waves plugin. So let's hear kind of what they sound like. So we'll turn on the hall. We're sending to the halls now.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
So that's the 480L. That's my fave, and I use that on most vocals, and it's super, super duper dark, but don't worry, there's more to come. That's by design, and it's usually not too long. I like it to kind of be short. Here is the 224.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
So a little longer, a little wider, a little more like a traditional kind of pop reverb would be that one. And Manny here, again, he's got all kinds of crazy options. It's pretty amazing.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
So just more modern, just cleaner, just very cool. These plugins are amazing. So there was something speaking to me about the 480L, so let's go with that one. And again, once I've got these set up, I go export and audio mix down, and then I'll choose the effect. So this would be the hall reverb. Set everything up, name it, set up my and export, and then it'll be audio. And then if the plugins disappear, no worries. Okay, so there's that. And then the final piece of the puzzle here is a plate reverb. And let's have a listen to those. Normally I do the hall and the plate together because I'm really interested in how they combine. Same thing, I've got the EQ taking the top and bottom out. And this is my favorite plate. There's even a more expensive, kind of newer plate reverb from UAD. This is the EMT 140 and this is the EMT 250. But this is actually too hi-fi for me. I actually prefer the older sounding one. So let's hear what that sounds like.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
So, oh my goodness, that just sounds amazing to me. What are you guys talking about over here? Lexicon reverbs make keys jingling sound like the voice of an angel. Indeed they do, Omar. Indeed they do, which is why I have them all loaded up in here. They're pretty amazing. I've got some other ones too from Lexicon, but these days I'm favoring the UAD ones. Anyway, so that's the EMT 140, and oh boy, I just love that. This one is pretty special. It's a Waves Abbey Road plate. Doesn't have as much control, but boy, oh boy, does this ever sound nice on the right thing. If it's the wrong thing, it's really not a great plugin, but if it's the right thing, it's really awesome. This is what it sounds like.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
Whoa, beautiful. So the plates are generally longer for me than the halls, and usually a little brighter also.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned.
Okay, so that's the EMT 250. So let's choose these reverbs. So let's go back to the hall and let's see what we like here. Let's listen again.
I don't need to go.
That one is just perfection for me. Let's hear this one.
I don't need to go.
Let's hear Manny.
I don't need to go run.
I'm sort of feeling Manny today for whatever reason. So let's go with Manny, and now let's add the plates and see. This is going to be way too much. We're going to turn the stuff down, but let's see which plate works best. So start with the 140 here.
I don't need to go run away.
Pretty nice. Let's try Abbey Road.
I don't need to go run away.
Ooh, that sounds pretty good. Something going on there. And let's try this plate here, the EMT 250. Here we go.
I don't need to go run away.
That just sounds like a record to me. So after I diss the EMT 250, I'm going to use it because it just blends so well with the other thing. So, and let's add the delays back in.
I don't need to go run away. I just want to feel stoned.
We're getting somewhere, folks. Let's put the mod back in. And now I'm going to start, like right now, these effects are crazy loud. So I'm going to start blending it and turning it into something. So, so let's hear it with the ADT. It's this guy and girl, and then we'll start blending.
I don't need to go run away. I just want to feel stoned. All I need a hideaway till this right isn't wrong.
Okay, so that's a basic blend. Now, I'm blending these on the effects tracks, which you certainly can do, but I also have been talking about how I go file, export, audio mix down, and turn them into audio. So that blending would happen on the audio tracks, not on the effects tracks, but because I didn't bounce them all, I just showed you how I do that. I'm doing it here. But gee guys, let's now hear the vocal without all these effects and hear what that sounds like.
I don't need to go run away. I just want to feel stoned.
Hold on to your hats. Here it is with everything.
I don't need to go run away. I just want to feel stoned.
And just to make the whole thing sort of in perspective, let's have a listen to the original vocal without any of the stuff that we put on it. Where's my vocal? Here it is. Okay, so I've turned off all those inserts. It's still going through the group, but I've turned off all those inserts and there's no effects. Here's the vocal.
I don't need to go run away. I just want to feel stoned. All I need a hideaway till this right isn't wrong. All I see are signs.
Okay, let's put it all back on and let's listen that much. So inserts on the vocal channel, inserts on the group channel, and all my effects, and here it is.
I don't need to go run away. I just want to feel stoned. All I need a hideaway till this right isn't wrong. All I see are signs. All this needed was time. I gotta say it to you. I've held back so long.
ladies and gentlemen, that is how I process a vocal from beginning to end, minus the tuning part, which we'll talk about in a future episode. Aya wants to know delays. So the first one is the UAD EP34 tape echo, super awesome. The second one I use is the UAD Galaxy tape echo, which is a emulation of a Roland Space Echo, which if you ever see one of those used, please call me because I would love one. And I also have the Man American delay, which is a Waves plugin. And the EQ I'm using is it's actually a live EQ out of the Waves suite called Emo Q4. But really any EQ we'll use there. The quality of that one is not overly important. I just chose that one because I like the display. I like being able to see what is happening here. But I could have used an HEQ, or I could have used the built-in Steinberg EQ, or any EQ really would work for that. So that one isn't as critical as the rest of it. So I don't know if there's any more questions about all this vocal stuff, but I hope that was useful. The other question I wanted to get to, and I know we're going long tonight, but I won't be too long on this, is I was asked all the different ways to save, and saving in Cubase and Nuendo, and what that's about. Because when you go into the file menu, save, save as, save new version, revert, save as template, backup project, oh my goodness, so many options. And actually, we even have, while I'm here, we should make note of, in the preferences, under edit at the bottom, there's preferences. We even have, under the general preferences, we have autosave. Check. Always have that checked. If your computer ever crashes, this will save you, because what this does is, while you're working, whatever time interval you have set here, so for me, every 15 minutes, it saves my work without me actually having to go and press save. It's amazing, and you want to use it. So, and I can change it. I can have it so that it's every 14 minutes or every 10 minutes, whatever. It doesn't matter. And I find my computer doesn't crash a whole lot. So now that I've said that, it's probably going to crash. But anyway, I find 15 minutes is a good thing for me, because when I get into it, generally a new idea will be about 15 minutes of work. So, and then it lets me choose how many of these backup files it's going to save. So when it saves like, autosave 1, autosave 2, and it'll save 10 different ones. So it doesn't get rid of the previous one if I forget to save in between. So I like to have lots of backup versions. So everybody, edit, preferences, make sure autosave is turned on, and it will save you if you ever have a computer crash or anything like that. It's very important. But back to the save menu. So all that save does, which is on my PC here, it's Control S. All that save does is whatever my name is up here. So I have, my name is Never Cared Anyway Steinberg. So if I hit save, like that, now under that name, how my session is right now is the way it is. But it's written the last version. So if I go, oh, I really liked what it was before I made all those changes, and I liked the way I had the effects set up before. Too bad, I just saved over it. I don't have another copy of my file. So a way that you can kind of get around this, and I've actually made this a nervous tick in myself, and I'm constantly, while I'm working, I don't even think about it anymore. It's a good habit to get into. I use Save New Version. So on my PC keyboard, it's Control-Alt-S. On a Mac keyboard, let me get to the browser, and I can show you what the key commands are. On a Mac keyboard, it's Command-Alt-S. So on the PC, you use the outer keys in S, but on the Mac, it's Command-Alt-S. and so when I'm autosaving, I'm just constantly autosaving, and you'll see what happens if you watch. Let me go back to the new window screen. If you watch the name, it adds. It should add. It adds 1, 2. So I'm saving. Save 3. Save 4. What I'm doing is I'm using save new version. Save 5, but I'm doing it with key commands 6, 7, 8. So how I had it before is it's saved under the original name, but each time I do this, it just adds a number to my name. So it's different iterations of the same save, and this is amazing. And so while almost every time I stop to breathe, I just do it again and again, and I just keep saving. And these files are pretty small on a hard drive, so you don't have to worry about it filling up, and you know, you can always delete them after. But the great thing about this is that if you just keep doing this, you'll have multiple versions, and if you find you screwed something up, you can always go back, or if a file becomes corrupt, you'll have a bunch. And you know, I've gotten to the point now where before I stop, I do it 3 times. So 1, 2, 3. And so I have 3 that are exactly the same. And you know, I can't tell you how many times like a hard drive has gone bad or something's happened, and I'm so happy that I have multiple versions of the same thing. So that's the save that I use the most, and I just keep working and I just keep saving. Save as is something that I do when I get to a different part of the project. So everybody has their own naming conventions. So for me, tonight I had Never Cared Anyway, Steinberg. Now let's just say I'm ready to mix. So I would go save as, and then I would go Steinberg and mix. And so now I've got it saved as Never Cared Anyway, Steinberg mix, because I saved as under a different name. And now while I'm mixing, I would do my nervous tick, which is save new version in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's kind of how I do it. So every time I get to a new stage, I do save as, and I use save new version an awful lot. I don't actually use save all that much. Now, if I'm working on something and I'm like messing around and I start screwing around, and you know, I don't remember what the knobs were, and I haven't saved it, I can go revert to the previous save version. So if I go use revert, it'll go back to the last version I saved before I screwed it up with all my stuff. So that's a really useful feature to have. Save as template is one that I use a lot. And what I do with that, some of you know I showed you how I set up my click track, and I have my tracks all laid out the way I want. So if you find that you're working the same way all the time and you tend to have things set up the same way, you can save things as a template, and then when you first load up a new session, an empty session, it can have all your stuff in it. So it can have plugins, it can have tracks, it can have effects. So I highly recommend setting up things the way that you want, and then saving them as a template. And then it shows up, see I have Sli-Fi Click there. It shows up when you go to open, it shows up here. So there's Sli-Fi Click, there's my template. And these are templates that Steinberg preset for us, or you can just start with an empty session. But so I usually start with my Sli-Fi Click, or if I know I'm working on an album and I'm gonna record drums the same way, and I want everything to be, to each song to start in a similar way, I may set up a template just for that project and save it that way. Now, the one that's the most confusing, and it's kind of because it's in 2 different places, is backup project, which is right here, and also under media, prepare archive is another one. And these are very, very similar with some subtle differences. Basically, if you want to share your session with someone else, basically you want to make sure that you have all the stuff that you need in one folder. So both backup project, which is here, and Media Prepare Archive do just that. They allow you to create a new folder and save a copy of all your files in the new folder. And it makes sure, while it's doing all that stuff, that it makes sure that you have everything you need to share with someone else. And it leaves the session that you're working on unchanged. So I can get to this point in my session. I've got my kind of my mix set up. I like how everything's sounding, but I want to send it to a friend to do some more work on it, but I don't want to mess with what I have here. So what I can do is I can either back up the project or prepare the archive. Now, what's the difference? Well, backup project, this one over here, it basically just allows you to save the session in a new file, and it makes a copy of all the files that you have, all the tracks that you have in the new folder. So when you give it to them, there's a song file and all your tracks are there. But none of your plugins and everything will be in the session, but they're not flattened or rendered into the files. So if you give it to your friend and they don't have the same plugins as you, when they open it, it's going to be missing a bunch of plugins. And that's not great if you want them to have your plugins. So when you want the option of flattening things or rendering parts out with effects or just building those things directly into it, that's when you use Media Prepare Archive, because that will allow you to save and flatten things and include effects and really customize the folder that you're giving to someone else. But in both cases, these leave your original session unchanged. So I hope that helps on the saving stuff. I think we've got a few more questions. So I use save as to, what's the difference between using save as and save new version? Save as allows me, save as allows me to create a new name. So if I go save as, I can completely give it a new name. It doesn't just add a number to the end and then go up sequentially. So I can change this to Mix Awesome, and I can now save it as Mix Awesome. So now it has a new name. But save new version is just going to add a number to the end of the name that I already have. So there's save new version 01, save new version 02. So it's just saving the session and just adding a little number to the end of it. So I tend to do save as and change the name when I get to kind of a place in the project where it's sort of, okay, I'm in a new place now and I'm going to give this a new name. And then I just save new version and it goes up sequentially until I get to the next big place. So for me, that's usually tracking, editing, mixing, mastering. Okay, and yay, Omar liked the session. Well, that's good. It's always good when your boss likes what you're doing. That makes your life a lot easier from Monday to Friday. Anyway, does anyone have anything else for me? Or is it possible that we have reached the end once again? JG, you got anything? I'm going to put the music back in. I didn't do a very good job of fading in, did I? Actually, I'm not going to do that. Why don't we play this tune out? Because I think we haven't listened to it all the way through with the new vocals. So let's do that. And if you have any more questions, type them in. If not, I just want to say thanks for coming out again and again. You guys are fantastic. And you know what I'd like to do? Can you guys send me emails offline? What I think would be awesome is I would love it if you guys would send me a session of yours. And, which is why we talked about all that save as stuff. And if you could send me a session, then if you don't mind, it'd be cool to pull them up and maybe work on them. And maybe that would be a good way to kind of see some of the features and check some stuff out. So send me an email if you're up for me working on one of your sessions in one of these. That would be fantastic. Anyway, let's play the tune. We'll play it out. Thanks so much again for coming back. I'll send emails, and we'll do this again a month from now. And hopefully it will be super fun and exciting and entertaining and interesting. And hopefully you get some takeaways that make your work a little bit better. But here it is, Never Cared Anyway by the Doyle Brothers with our cool vocal mix. Thanks for coming out, you guys.
I don't need to go run away. I just wanna feel stoned. All I need a hideaway till this right isn't wrong. All I see are signs. All this needed was time. I gotta say it to you. I've held back so long, but now that we're being true, we've always been wrong. I've closed my mind to the thought of you, 'cause you never get anyway. Still believe in my destiny. Hope is still hanging on. Locked outside the best of me. Hope this fight isn't long. All I see are signs. All this needed was time. I gotta say it to you. I've held back so long, but now that we're being true, we've always been wrong. I've closed my mind to the thought of you, 'cause you never get anyway. I know you never get anyway. I've closed my mind one final time. I gotta say it to you. I've held back so long, but now that we're being true, we've always been wrong. What I'm saying to you, I've held back so long. Not that you ever knew, we've always been wrong. You never cared anyway. No, you never cared anyway. No, you never cared anyway. You never cared anyway. No, you never cared anyway. it's right place, and it's right.